All right. We should be live right now. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's been a while. And I'm just going to check my YouTube channel. Should be live right now. Oh, echo. Everybody, welcome
That
back.
was an echo.
And I'm just going to check my YouTube channel. Should be live right now. Oh, echo. Everybody, welcome
That was
back.
an echo.
All right. We're definitely on YouTube. I'm just going to check my YouTube channel. Should be live right now. That's probably me. There we go. I had like 3 YouTubes open. And welcome back, Michael.
Good to be back, Joe.
I'm glad you're here again. You are definitely one of my favorite people in ufology, and we haven't even known each other that long.
Where do I swipe the card for that comment?
And we do have somebody, and since somebody, it's rare that people call in, I am going to go to somebody right off the bat, and it's Henry. Henry, where are you calling from? Where are you?
I'm in Merrimack, New Hampshire.
So I know we were talking earlier before the show. You had a video which I cannot find. Do you have?
I put it in the chat.
Do you have a question for? Oh, you put it in the chat.
I did put it in the chat.
Okay. While I'm looking, if you have any other questions from Michael or myself, feel free to.
I do. So the video that really kind of strikes, and it's very similar to the Tic Tac, is the Chilean video, right? Have you seen the Chilean video from the Chilean Navy that was released several years ago? And it's a Tic Tac that's releasing a gas as it's flying. There are distortions to the north and south of it and east and west of it. And I don't know if those are gravimetric distortions, but have you ever seen it? Have you analyzed or anybody analyzed? Have you heard anything about it?
I've seen it, and I don't know what it is. It does not look like a like there's a fairly, you see it in the news a lot when they're doing a promo for Tucker Carlson's some UFO segment. They'll show what is very clearly to me a video taken of an airliner from an airliner. I mean, the airliner that's being videoed is out pretty distant, and it's giving off its condensation trail. But they use that a lot. That show, in the context of that's a UFO leaving a trail. So when I first saw the Chilean video, I first thought condensation trail, but the more you look at it,
in the context of that's a UFO leaving a trail.
there's an enormous.
When I first saw the Chilean video, I first thought condensation
Did you hear that?
You hear the echo?
Yeah.
Oh my God!
It's an enormous Chilean video.
We're being hacked. That's really odd. You hear the echo?
Joe, I think it's the mics from everybody who's on. If they're on and they have their volume pretty high, right, it's going to feed back into the system.
Yeah. I think it's yours, Joe, because mine's I'm on headset.
Pretty high, right? It's going to
Coming across on my laptop.
All right, I'm going to try putting headphones on for the heck of
It's
it.
yours, Joe, because mine's I'm on headset.
I mean, it's such a delay.
Right?
That fixed it. Can you hear us?
I still hear the delay.
Yeah, but there's no echo.
It is gone. Thank God. Holy mackerel.
So at first I thought that the Chilean video was an airliner and a condensation trail. But the closer you look at it, I don't know what it is, but it's not. I don't think it's an airliner with a condensation trail.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at really closely, and this is what really drives me crazy, is nobody talks about this, right? If you look at the video fairly closely, there are these distortions, right? There's a north-south. I mean, if you look at it, there's
I'm having major problems with echo
distortions
still.
occur.
Yeah, I'd have to look at it again. I don't recall the distortions. That's the one that has the crosshairs, right? Doesn't it include the crosshairs?
No, this one's off the coast of Chile, and it's about a 3 or 4 minute video.
It shows no ground clutter in the back. Nothing in the ground. It's looking up and out.
Yes,
It's not looking down. I know.
yeah.
The one
And the
you're
only
talking
thing
about.
they do is they actually go from FLIR to hard visual. You can see the clouds, right? You don't see the object. It's a strange video,
Hey
but
guys, I'm having horrible echo. It's really like impossible to hear because everything's doubling up. You guys having any? I'm gonna try to remove Henry right now.
okay.
Michael, I still hear myself and everybody else repeating.
Say something else. Joe, say something.
I mean, I'm still hearing myself talking right now from before. It's
You're,
like on
you're
a
not
loop.
coming across on my speakers at all. You're coming across only my headphones, and that cannot be picked up as input for this microphone. I mean, I can try.
It's
you want
not
to try?
you. Let me try muting you, but all right, let's see. Now, is it anything coming from my echo? It's not you. When I mute you, it's still going on. It's really difficult, and I don't really know how to get out of this and get back in. I could try removing me. I could ignore the echo, but it's really difficult.
Turn on echo cancellation. Go into your audio settings and click echo cancellation.
Yeah, it's already on.
I just turned mine on. Did it help?
Let's see. I'm hearing myself talk in my ear right now, so it's like it repeats multiple times. It's not just a delay. I don't think I have YouTube playing in the background, but that's what it does sound like. It does sound like it's YouTube.
Did you click on Henry's link? Is it playing in the background?
No, I did not play on Henry's link, and I'm sorry, everybody. I'm going to get rid of every. I'm going to get rid of every other link I have up just in case, but there's nothing else. There is no YouTube link that I can see. Let's see. Best laid plans. Oh, that might be it. And we're good. It was my fault. It was all my fault. I'm bringing Henry back in. Go ahead, Henry. I'm sorry. It was operator error.
No, not a problem. That was the question I had. It's just that on the Chilean video, I noticed that there are these cardinal distortions, north, south, east, west. Don't know if they're gravimetric, if they're time distortions. It's pretty interesting. I was looking at it very closely and time sliced it, slowed it down, and looking at it. And I thought I saw the same type of distortion on the video that was recently put out by It's Redacted on the San Diego sphere that has 3 antenna-like protrusions, and it was floating out just 400 feet above this guy's house. The video was really amazing.
It looks a little bit like Sputnik, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
And I think the Chilean video, isn't that the one Mick West said was a jet? Isn't that the one Leslie Kane was promoting for a long time? I really haven't spent much time on the Chilean video. I thought it had been debunked as a jet. I could be wrong.
Well, I'm just posting it in the chat now. Bruce Maccabee did an analysis of it.
Thanks, Henry.
I probably saw it, but I don't remember what his conclusions were. I can remember how to spell Maccabee. And so it ought to be pretty, I trust Bruce Maccabee. He's a data-driven guy. And if he's an optical scientist, So
the reason I don't think I've seen Maccabee's analysis. I wanted to talk to you about the
But I can see the
information.
distortions that Henry was talking about early in the video.
I would like to see the video that Henry's talking about off of San Diego, but we were not able to find it. I'm going to share the.
Did you not have it? You may send it to you?
I don't have it.
It's in the chat. He put it in the chat.
Yeah, I didn't see. It was in the YouTube chat?
No, the private chat.
Got it. I'll look at it later. All right, so
It's remarkably clear.
I'm going to go. This is great work by Keith Basterfield. Hopefully he does not mind. I want to go through the bills that Lou was talking about related to the Senate and the House. Have you been able to read through those at all?
I've read through it, yeah.
What do you think? I mean, the Senate, for people who don't know, they've come out with the proposed bills in the Senate and the House. The House is much more in depth. These are just proposed language. There's nothing finalized yet. The Senate calls for the permanent, basically get rid of the UAP task force. I won't go through everything. Basically, they're calling, we get rid of the UAP task force and make it a permanent office in our government. And the House goes through specifics of exactly what they want. Development procedures, synchronized and standardized collection, UAP, evaluating links between UAP and adversarial governments, evaluating the threat, which is interesting because, with Condon, there is no threat. Blue Book is no threat. So they're actually at least talking about that. And one of the bigger things in there where they talked about, they didn't say crash retrievals, but they talked about the exact wording. Here it is. Any update. They want updates on any efforts, understanding on the ability to capture or exploit discovered UAP. And I remember when Lou read that on the air, he was like, yeah, inferring that's related to crash retrieval. So what's your overall thought about where we're heading, where we're going right now, as far as, did you think we'd even get this far right now? And I know it's not finalized, but 3 years ago, if you would have told me we were talking about this, and I would have said, yeah, I doubt it, 3.5 years ago. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's promising. I'm encouraged by it. It reminds me of the initial language that was drafted during the Trump administration, and then we saw how that morphed into a product of a 6-page report that was pretty thin last June. So the overall language survived, but what I see in this one, I think it's probably no secret that Chris Mellon has been instrumental in providing language to the Senate and the House staffers on what to include and what directions to take. It wouldn't surprise me if he's had discussions about staffing. And I think, right now it's just language, right? And it's probably going to morph into something more finalized. We saw how Kathleen Hicks at the Pentagon level turned the UAP report into actionable directives. Okay. But I think it's been recognized, and everybody, Mellon and Lou Elizondo and others have talked about the lack of administrative and or leadership horsepower that the task force had. I think they even went so far as to say that there was perhaps only as high as a GS-15. So if people aren't familiar with the government pay or ranking structure, you're typically somebody starting out might be, out of college might be, I know this because my son started out as a GS-7. And he was in a program to get to GS-12 after 4 years. It was an internship. But GS-12, 13, you really start getting into the sort of the upper levels of the GS layer at GS-14 and 15. And so if Elizondo and Mellon were saying that They understood that the leadership of the task force was only at a GS-15 level. And I've gotten confused reading about it lately because it seems to be, maybe it was a SES, Senior Executive Service, which is next level up above GS, which is better. So SES would be like equivalent to a flag rank officer. And when you're lobbying, when you within an agency or an organization, within the intelligence or defense community, when you're advocating for a program or running a program, you really need to fight for budgetary dollars, right? So if you're only a GS-15, you're like a department head. And I'm talking about, let's say you're a fire department head, right?
Right.
You've got the guy that's in charge of the hook and ladder, and you've got the guy that's in charge of personnel, that kind of department head. But if you've got somebody that's directorate level with inside an agency, agencies are usually divided up into chief directorates, maybe for SIGINT or imagery intelligence or some other kind of intelligence. The directorate level is where you start getting into these senior executive service people, SESs. And they are, at some level, they begin to become equivalent with your elected leaders in Congress. So the point is, the language is fine, and what it morphs into, it's going to morph into. But what I think is important to watch is where the office is staffed out of, what level is the leadership of the organization, and then how much horsepower and how much coordination does the effort get from across the DoD and the IC. So, for example, if you have like major satellite programs, the DNI has what's called the community management staff. And these are staff members that are helping the machine run, okay? And then you have your advisory boards on intelligence, and you have your collection management authorities that are racking and stacking targets and how they get processed and based on priority. So if this effort ends up, based on the language, getting enough attention that it gets really senior leadership appointed as its head, and they get direction from DOD or from DNI that there shall be, using shall statements. Those are actual statements where they're directing agencies and organizations to cooperate and collaborate with them. And I think the language already includes the report types and the frequencies that they expect, right? It's something greater than 100 than every 180 days, if I remember correctly. So if it gets staffed well, if you go back and listen to Chris Mellon's appearance on Joe Rogan, he sort of was asked, if you were king for a day, how would you set it up? And he laid it all out very logically, and it all made perfect sense. If that happens, then I think we'll all be high-fiving about it. But if it ends up getting, like a Navy commander or an Air Force colonel or something, head of this office, and they don't have broad cooperation and collaboration, then I wouldn't say that it would die on the vine, but it's also going to take, over on the legislative side, it's going to take members of the House and Senate being involved, being interested, attending the briefings, because these guys from the IC and the DoD, they're briefing on the Hill all the time. But if you talk to the people that give these briefings, so many times these jokers aren't even showing up for them. They might send a staffer, but there's no such thing as like 100% attendance. And you would think a topic of this nature would get a full house, but we'll see. So it just really, we used to talk about it a lot. Programs live and die based on their advocacy within the community. So if this program, once it gets established, gets really strong advocacy within the DoD, within the IC, and from the Hill, then and people keep pushing, the public keeps pushing and writing their elected leadership and asking them questions, keep them interested, keep their feet to the fire, then there's a lot of promise here.
I'm going to go to a question, and I want to get back to that. I want to get back to open hearings because people were predicting open hearings. But Chris, my friend Chris Wolford, has a question. What are your thoughts on Lou Elizondo? What has he done? What Lou has done along with Mellon, which we kind of answered, and those guys, I don't think we'd be here without both of them. And also your overall thoughts on experiencers. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Good question. I've met Lou. I didn't meet Chris. Lou is the same person today when I watch him on television or on YouTube or whatever as he was in real life. He's very sincere. He comes across that way. And, we've all met people over our lifetimes where you come away from meeting somebody and, it's maybe sketchy. You're not really. And then we've all been fooled. But I came away with a very strong impression of Lou having his heart in the right place. He's very energetic with this topic, very devoted to it. He knows what he has seen. He knows that there's more out there, and I think it's safe to say now because he's basically said it. I mean, he told me, that there's evidence that they have that would just blow your socks off, very close up, very high definition videos and photographs. I like what he's done, whether he was with TTSA or out as an independent, kind of working with Mellon and others in the background. Chris Mellon, I think so I come from the naval cryptologic community. And what that means is mostly the Navy
definitely.
said.
Yeah, go to your background a little bit because a lot of people may not know who the heck you are.
So it's, the Navy cryptologic community is very closely tied to the National Security Agency. And I am close personal friends with a lot of senior Navy retired cryptologic officers. And to a person, almost none of them were piping up about anything related to this topic up till about, I don't know what, Joe, 6 months ago. And I had commented to you how I'm on an email distro that has, I think it's like 162 of these people in retirement. UFOs were in the news a lot over the last year, and there wasn't a peep until Mellon became more prominent in the news. And it was amazing, these people coming out of the woodwork. It's not often when these emails come out every day. It's a broad distro, about 160 something people, covering a range of unclassified versions of classified news. Quite often you don't see any comments, any follow-up emails on any of these topics, maybe one or two a week. But about the time Mellon and Elizondo started hitting Fox News and CNN and the other outlets, especially Mellon is remembered by so many of these guys. He is very highly respected. His reputation is pure gold in the DOD and the IC. I forget which administration. I guess it was the Bush administration under which he was appointed, but he did not play either side of the fence. He did his job, and he apparently did it very, very well. I have not heard a single negative thing about him. And when you listen to him speak, his command of the English language, that's one thing. But his command of legislative speak, of programmatic speak, he talks in terms of budgetary dollars and outcome-based results, and initiatives that have a firm underpinning of hard data and science. He comes across to me as someone who can either expertly advise almost anyone on the planet how to put together an organization or a company, or an effort of any kind. And I would love to be a fly on the wall in his office listening to him, because apparently he works pretty closely with these people that are on what's called the community management staff underneath the DNI and the Senate staffs and the House Representative staffers. And so it's not like he's got the ear of individual discrete senators and congressmen every day, because they don't have time to take phone calls from citizens like Chris Mellon even. But he's got the ears of their people that they listen to, which are their staffers. So I think what he's doing is immensely important. I think he's played that role exceedingly well. And I don't think we would be nearly as far down this path. I would bet, my phrase, I'd bet my house that he wrote half of this language we see in this bill.
I was just going to say that. Looking at it, it's just like when you read his previous works, it's in there. I mean, he probably wrote most of it.
I believe he did.
And that's why when people are like, why now? It's because Mellon and Elizondo. I mean, because Tom DeLonge gave, and I say it all the time, DeLonge gave Elizondo a place where he can go. He was frustrated, and just timing worked out. I've gone back and forth. Maybe it's because the uptick in sightings, and people are like, we need to start getting the truth out. I don't think so. I think it's Elizondo, Mellon, and the people behind the scenes who Lou has not spoken about because they don't want to come out yet. The last part of Chris's question was your overall take on experiencers.
Yeah, I have to admit that I think I've told you this before, Joe. So in '92, when I had my sighting, I was in the Navy. I was on a Navy ship. I was in a hot area of the world, and the last thing I had on my mind or wanted to even clutter my mind with was anything approaching what we sometimes here referred to as the woo factor, right? It was always just a little too much for me. Now, I have to admit, sometime around the time the book came out, that was at least my understanding. I did read years ago, Communion.
The book
I think I read that. What year was that published? That'll help me get a bearing on.
85 or 86, I think. I'll make sure, though.
So it was definitely before the Gulf War in 1991. Because some point after I was married in '89, and I remember reading the book on an airplane, either on the way to the Persian Gulf or on the way home. It was probably on one of my trips over. And that book stuck with me. So I've always sort of, I'm fortunate to have been sort of schooled, if you will, in the trade of measuring information quality, evaluating information, making decisions off information, and so forth. So when I read that book, you're right, there's a grain of salt in there with every sentence. But I'm sort of like, what's the late researcher? I always forget his name when I'm going to talk about him. Stanton Friedman.
Yeah.
He began in the latter years to lead with or to conclude by saying that the evidence is overwhelming that the Earth is being visited, blah, 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 by extraterrestrial intelligence. Well, to me, it's the experiencer realm. It's the weight of the total body of the claims. And from what I understand, a lot of these people have been very seriously researched by some very serious and sober scientists, to the extent that apparently many of them are being are involved in testing of maybe their DNA and their immunological systems to try to determine if there are markers either from the experience or markers that set them out and set them as somehow different from the rest of us, that make them more of a target, if you will, more of a recipient of the experience. I don't know how to put it, but
yeah, it was the work that Gary Nolan was working on related to the antenna, and they weren't sure if it was something that attracted to them, attracted the phenomenon to them, or something that happens in the family. It was too early. Nolan was talking about how it's too early to even make any conclusion. But it was 87 of February, just so you know, Communion.
Okay.
And it's the book that changed my life as far as this, because I had no idea there was anything even like that until I saw that book.
Yeah. So I don't disbelieve them. I tend to believe that something's going on. Um, I always fall back to our criminal justice system. We are allowed to enter and to rule based on eyewitness testimony. So why should it be any different when people are making claims? Obviously, just like a criminal case, there needs to be an investigation, but you're still dealing with people that are making claims. And it's the total volume of those claims that to me makes it where if only one of them has to be true, right? Only one of them has to be true. That if you, for an instant or at some point, made a conclusion that you just did not believe any of that, thought it was complete and utter bullshit, and then one of them turns out to be true, however it's proven, then that compels you to go back and look at all of them again, right? So, and you can apply that to whether it's experiences or UFO sightings that are absent of a photograph or a video or whatever. It forces you to relook at the information, to reconsider a different set of potential alternatives. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting. Can they all be lying? And why are their stories so similar in so many ways? To me, that's
I agree.
compelling.
I mean, yeah, something's going on, and specific cases. I know there are different cases, but the overall point that you just mentioned, how their stories are all similar, and you speak to these people, they don't want most of them do not want publicity. That was the thing that John Mack and Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs found. They don't want to talk. A lot of them were professionals. A lot of people, professional lawyers, doctors, you name it, having experiences. You have Jim Semivan, had an abduction-like experience. So it's really those folks I think we need to lean on eventually. And people get mad at me because I do have friends who are experiencers, and they're like, they need to be at the forefront right now. And I'm like, I think we need to stay more with, nuts and bolts for now, because I still can't get family members and friends who have never had an interest in this, even what's going on right now. Maybe a couple, but for the most part, they're not interested still. So for me to go into experiencers, it's too much for them. But eventually, yeah, I do. I think that's the key. What's going on? I don't know. And you and I have talked about threat. It's not a threat. And I had that audio on Twitter this week where I said, there's no way. Lou was talking about it. Anybody who tells you this is not a threat, I don't listen to that. I don't know it is a threat. I don't know if it is not a threat. I have no idea. And I know you have thoughts along the same idea as what are we dealing with?
Well, so let's talk about the threat narrative, first of all. I think I told you this. I think I would like to think that everybody would agree, but I'm sure they would not. But it really would be a serious miscarriage of duty if you were in the military or in the legislative branch, and you were aware of the nature of this phenomenon, and you did not, first and foremost, look at the worst case scenario. You have that. I mean, that's what corporations do. I mean, I work right now in cybersecurity, and when you're dealing with cybersecurity and data privacy, the very first thing you do is you assess the type of data you're dealing with and what its gravity is if lost or exposed or breached. What's the worst case? And there are certain regulations around the world, from Europe, and it's even growing in the United States, where for a single record, like say Joe's medical files, or 3 records, Joe's and Mike's and Henry's medical file, much less a trove of medical records. If you lose those, if they're put out on WikiLeaks or something with all those social security numbers and hair color and eye color and all this biometric data, whatever, the monetary liability is enormous to the extent that you could hold the corporation at risk from survival. So if you apply that same, so you have to approach everything from the worst case scenario and start from that perspective when you're trying to secure the data with your information system security and things of that nature. It's no different with UFOs UAP. Until we know what it is, until we can say with fact certain that it's not a threat, well, it's pretty obvious that what we've caught on camera, what eyewitnesses have seen, military, policemen, firemen, lay people around the world, these things have exhibited capabilities that far and away outstrip the capabilities of our most advanced aircraft, weapon systems, whatever you want to call it. And if that's the case, even though there supposedly hasn't been an instance where they have, turned on us en masse, it seems pretty apparent based on some of the capabilities we have observed that if they were hostile, we would not be in the advantage. We would be severely disadvantaged. So you have to classify it in a way that allows you to turn your energies and your organizations and your funding and all of your research and all of your technologies into trying to find a solution for the problem. So you're both trying to figure out what it is, and you're trying to figure out what can it do to us. How can we prevent it from doing that to us if it did that to us, if it tried to do something? So there's an enormous, I would imagine, despite the fact that they claim otherwise, there's an enormous effort underway, probably has been for decades, to try to get, if it's possible, an upper hand, or to try to perhaps mask or obfuscate shell games with our technologies to try to keep certain things from being discovered, because these things do have a propensity for hanging around some of our most advanced facilities and some of our most sensitive technologies. So I don't have a problem with somebody claiming it's a threat. They really need to do that to allow the greatest focus of our our resources. And where are our greatest resources? It's in the intelligence community, our scientific community, our military community. They've got to figure this out. If it's known now that it's not a threat, and yet they're running around with their hair on fire like it is, just to stir up funding, well, that wouldn't be the first time, right? Weapons of mass destruction, and you can go back throughout history. But they really do have to treat it as a threat until or unless it's proven otherwise. Otherwise, it won't get the attention.
I agree, obviously. And, I get a lot of flack from both sides. If I mention threat, and Lou has gotten flack too, and it's funny because he seems a little hesitant right now, because if he doesn't mention a threat, people are like, well, what are you talking about? We don't know what they are. And he's like, well, I've already gotten a lot of flack when I even mentioned potential threat. So I know he's in a tough situation there. One of the questions I'm going to go with, I'm not really exactly sure. Maybe you can make this out. What if legislation formalizes the study of experiencers, which is brought up in some of the language talking about physical effects from these objects? What if legislation formalizes the study of experiencers in relation to the UAP occupants and finds them to be a national security concern? All right, I understand. That's why I'm sorry, Coin Exchange. I understand. So what do you think if UAP are considered a national security concern, they're damaging people, maybe not intentional, but nonetheless, people are getting injured by having up close encounters? How would they even handle that? Our government? Yeah, any thoughts?
I don't, because I find it ludicrous that the government would even. I mean, some of this is how do I put this? I find it ludicrous to hear these statements that we don't know what it is when there's an overwhelming amount of evidence showing that we have been looking into this problem for decades. Okay. So you can go to that book that was written by the 5 or 6 different authors, UFOs and Government, a historical perspective, it's called. And they have nothing in there but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of government documents and maybe thousands of citations of actual. It's not. It's there's no speculation in that book. It is real government documents that have been released through the government's own passage of the Freedom of Information Act, going back to the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and up to near current day, as far as the book when it was published, showing very clearly that the government has been looking at this from the beginning. And then you have the Project Condign report that came out of the UK. And if you look at all the massive volumes of that, there are sections in there about the human effects caused by, is it ionizing or non-ionizing radiation? So they're well aware of this. And so this language might spur some more open investigation of UAPs in general, like it's proposing to be run out of a formal organization of the Pentagon, and they might look at experiencers. But I don't know what the outcome of that would be if they found somehow that, oh, well, they're walking amongst us, and this is a potential threat. They could be working in NORAD. They could be working in some of our most sensitive national security locations. My guess is they've been aware of that potential for decades. That's just my, based on everything I have seen, this business about we don't know what they are is, I'll just say it, it's a sham. But this is the new era, right? We're in the new era. Thanks to the 2017 New York Times article, there's new energy and momentum behind this. Now everybody, the biggest difference is people are less afraid to talk about it. People like us, people like me, being a cleared professional, people that are elected to the House of Representatives, to the Senate, the stigma is being stripped away. Scientists and academicians all over the place are jumping on board. Okay, that's the gravity of what's going on right now. Is this openness, this sort of perestroika of UFOism, right? I mean, it's really having its day, and it hasn't had its day, but it's approaching having its day, where it's going to get the attention everybody wants it to have. It gets funding and so forth, and cooperation from the government levels around the world to different academic organizations and scientific groups. But really, it's like, I never did find, and I looked and looked and looked for this. I read it. I don't know now where I read it, but there is a claim out there that someone who was very close to J. Allen Hynek said that he was thunderstruck. Those are my words, and I'm going to paraphrase. But somewhere near the end of Blue Book, maybe it was the end of his life, I think it was near the end of Blue Book, he was having a conversation with a senior Air Force general. I thought it was at the Pentagon. But he said something, he was frustrated. And I can't remember what Hynek said, but the general officer turned to him and said something like, "Alan, do you really think we've not been seriously looking at this entire time?" And he took that to his grave. That was the gist of whoever wrote this. Now, whether they were full of bullshit or not, I can't remember. I've looked and looked and looked for where I read that. I did not dream that. I read that somewhere. Be that as it may, you just can't have a first world nation like the United States with all of the military and intelligence and scientific capabilities that we have this going on around our most sensitive facilities for decades and not take it seriously. So I think that what we're seeing now is the public facing. It's sort of the regeneration of a new blue book era kind of thing going on. A lot of this is for our consumption, but on the inside, I'm absolutely certain, can't prove it, that senior DOD and intelligence officials are very, very concerned and involved with this and have been for a long time. And if there were people, experiencers that were believed to have any influence on anything, if it was in a negative way about our national security, that would already be known, characterized, and dealt with. So that's my opinion.
Yeah,
I just don't.
No, I always wonder. And my opinion is that somebody somewhere, I don't know how large of a group, knows a lot more. How much they know, I don't know. Lewis talked about, he's hinted we may have craft, we may see bodies, but we don't know intent. We don't know the big questions. I don't know if anybody knows intent. That would be the most important question, obviously. But I've asked people, I've said, do you know anybody that you would come in contact with that does know intent? And they're like, no, I don't. So I want to know how many people and how much they know. But yeah, I agree. This, Bob Fish, which I wrote about in my blog, talks about picking up signals from craft off the east coast of Florida, and they figured out where they're coming from and, when they're going to go in, the patterns and everything. So they know that kind of stuff. So what else do they know? I'm going to go to a question, which kind of goes to what we've talked about before. Your opinion on Roswell crashes and MJ-12. Thanks for the question, Alden.
Well, I tend to believe that Roswell happened. There are just too many witnesses, many of them now dead, that have given testimony to things they saw. And we know in that phase of our nation's evolution and the technological state of the art at the time, the Russians nor anyone else had the ability to overfly Roswell in the 509th Bomb Group in some sort of a reconnaissance operation and lose an asset due to a crash or being shot down. Nor do I believe that the Russians floated some balloon with some deformed children on board or whatever it was that came out of what's that lady's book?
Annie Jacobson Phenomena.
Yeah, somebody I think took her for a ride on that one. More of the obfuscation.
Yeah, I think the same source that she spoke to also spoke with Knapp and had the opposite, it was non-human, not from here story. So I'm not sure what happened with Annie Jacobson there.
Yeah. This is just, now I am not a UFO researcher. I'm a voracious reader, and I haven't read everything, but I've read enough to know, and I've seen enough credible. I've seen enough credible people speaking to other seemingly very credible people, groups of them, many, many, many people who were there at the time, and whether they were a child or what have you, or older, like Glenn Dennis, the mortician. Right. Do you come away from listening to his story, telling yourself that he sounds like he's full of crap? And he's just one example. And then there are the other supposed crashes at Corona that I believe some information has actually come out in the last 10 years. There's a husband and wife investigative team.
Yeah, Ross Coulthart covered them in his documentary, which I did not know a lot of that information. It's really, it's interesting. The husband and wife team, I forget the names.
And I'm not sure if this was related to that particular supposed crash, but there was another guy. I don't remember if I saw this on TV or if I saw this on the internet or what, but they were looking at satellite photographs of an area out there that had a supposed crash back in the 40s. And the landscape, we've heard the stories of how they would go out and do a what I would call the equivalent of a FOD walk down on an aircraft carrier deck. Do you know what that is? Right before flight operations start every day or every night, periodically they do it throughout the day, and they take volunteers. They will say on the carrier, they'll say, all hands to the flight deck for a FOD walk down. And everybody that works on the flight deck and anybody that is bored or has a few spare minutes or just wants to do it because it's interesting, you all come up to the front of the flight deck and you stand literally, it's standing room only, in a line across the entire flight, and you walk it slowly from front to back, looking down for any piece of metal, anything that a jet engine could suck up off that deck into the engine and cause damage or cause an explosion, whatever. And that's what they do when they go out, when they lose a high value aircraft that's being tested, like an F-117 crashes or an SR-71 years ago in development. When one of those crashed, they round up personnel from all over, and they go out there and set up, they set a cordon, a perimeter, and they get on their hands and knees with bags and they pick up everything they find. So supposedly witnesses knew of that happening. I think it was Roswell. But another more interesting thing to me was that I think it was Corona, the satellite photographs, you don't notice it until someone points it out. There's almost a triangle, if I recall correctly. There's an enormous swath of land that looks unnaturally altered, as if you had bulldozers or large earth-moving equipment out there at one point, sort of remaking the surface. You know how they build neighborhoods now in cities? They come in and they remove all of the topsoil, the top 3 or 4 feet down to what they call the hard pan. And that's where they'll trench in their infrastructure, their water and sewer lines and stuff like that. And they pile that dirt up off to the side, and then they sell it to people or they reuse it somehow. But, to come in and take the top 2 or 3 feet of dirt or sand or whatever was out there and push it into piles and sift it or whatever they did with it. That picture that they showed, which it could have been that husband and wife couple, I don't remember, but once I saw what they were talking about, it was kind of evident. If you go 2 miles over to the north or 2 miles to the south or in any direction, you see scrub and the terrain looks sort of undulating and it looks sort of natural. But in that one area, it looks like it was messed with on a very large scale. Why would they have done that? Right? Why would they have done that? Right. There's nothing built there. And then you have, I'm terrible with these folks' names. The PhD out of University of Raleigh, Durham, that wrote the book, American Cosmos.
Diana Pasulka.
Yeah, Dr. Pasulka. She talks in her book about the teleconference with the Bureau of Land Management people, and apparently there's a marker where she was taken or near where she was taken, blindfolded out there with those special altered metal detectors, and they apparently found some metallic fragments. But this, if I recall correctly, and I'll have to look at the book again, she talks about this area. I think her question was, why is this on any map? And the response was something like, well, if we put that on the map and said, this is the, where we believe or where it's reported that a flying saucer crashed in 1940, whatever, well, look what would happen to it. I mean, look what happened to, Roswell and
Right.
in the gate out there by Area 51. It would just get inundated and trampled all over. So apparently her book indicates that the Bureau of Land Management knows where this site is, but they don't publish it. It's not marked on any of their maps. And I've spent a fair amount of time out west trail riding in my Jeep, and I'm familiar with how BLM marks their land and all of that, and so I know how it appears on maps, but for them to know of something, I mean, it's quite conceivable, right? It's and again,
Right.
her book is what I have to go off of, but I thought that was pretty interesting.
I am going to ask you to shorten your answers a little bit, because we have so many questions that I have to catch up on. The last part of that question was MJ12. Do you think there's an MJ12 like group?
Wouldn't there have to be?
You would think that there were people put together to look at this at the highest levels. I would think,
Well, if you look at the stuff that we know about, like the proximity fuse, this was like Bush Senior, right? This was what was the guy's name? Supposedly a member of the MJ12, Vannevar Bush.
Yeah.
Right. He was part of the research and development board of the Pentagon. And this is the group that came up with the proximity fuse that anti-aircraft artillery used. Think about what a revelation that was. You shoot a cannon shell up in the sky, and it knows when it gets next to an airplane, and then it blows up. It senses the airplane. So that was key to winning the war. It's the same group that put their heads to trying to solve the Nazi U-boat problem, which they did. That was literally strangling the UK during World War II. They are responsible for some of the most impressive technological developments this country has ever known, the world has ever known. And to have that same or a similar group put in charge of something like this phenomenon, when they were seeing examples of it, having encounters, having observations of these things back then, it just makes all the sense in the world. Again, how could you ignore it? You couldn't.
Right.
You could not ignore it.
It would be
until
derelict of duty.
Yeah. Until you classified it, characterized the threat, you can't ignore something like that. You kidding me? You got something flying around our most sensitive facilities. You can't ignore that. So yeah, I think it's somebody knows somewhere.
Bobby Ray Inman, he spelled it wrong. He corrected afterwards. Any ideas on him?
Admiral
Bobby Ray Inman.
He's
on
the
what
one
he
that
might not know or may have known.
Yeah, I mean, I would just be speculating. Did he really fall out the window of Bethesda Naval Medical Center?
No, I think you're talking about Forrestal, right?
Oh, that's Forrestal. Yeah.
Forrestal, yeah,
Admiral Bobby Ray Inman. Well, I mean, Inman was so you look at this guy again in the cryptologic community. Inman was director of NSA, right? So it really in the intelligence community doesn't get much higher than what we call DIRNSA, director of NSA, DIRNSA. Conceivable that he knew quite a lot. You have to remember that, well, you don't have to do anything. I'm just saying that the mission of NSA is to protect our own communications from foreign adversaries. They also have legions of people that are out there collecting communications, listening to adversaries, listening to who knows what. I find it inconceivable that with all of NSA's capabilities, that if this phenomenon is emitting anything, in the EM spectrum or the RF band that it would not have been detected decades ago. And the minute it was detected, then hey, there's a mission right there. Go figure out what it is. So Inman, anything to do with NSA, their capabilities, the term eye-watering, they really are. They're pretty impressive. So I don't know what he knew, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out if he had sort of the keys to the kingdom in that respect.
There's another one. DeLong talks about some information that's horrifying, and Lewis mentioned if we knew what he knew, the reaction would be somber, which he explained later on. He didn't really mean it to be such a negative thing. So what's your take on that?
You know what my take is? I think
yeah, we
it's
both talked about how
what we
it
ask
could be
for.
really, it could be really something really negative that a lot of people don't even want to consider. And I don't know that to be the case, but I think we have to allow for that possibility that it's something that's really not going to be accepted well by the masses.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to, last thing I would want to be accused of is saying something that upset somebody, but there's a reason why they haven't told us what they know. So go further back than that. I find it implausible that they don't know more than what they're saying. Okay. If DeLong's comments are to be taken on face value, and I think you know where I stand with that whole group, he's just a person like you and me, but he had connections and he had money and an enormous following, and he had an idea, and he wasn't the first to ever try it. But he apparently did have these conversations with some very high-ranking, very well-connected people. And supposedly they told him some things that disturbed him. To me, that comports with a lot of if you look at the body of evidence, the total weight of claims, experiences, observed capabilities, this thing is, whatever it is weird. It is all powerful. And I don't see how it could not be dangerous if it wanted to. And I think that all of these cries for public hearings and we deserve, we can handle the truth. I'd say be careful what you ask for, because there's a reason why. And I think some of it's rooted in possibly if they've been able to make any gains by researching the technology and develop things from it that represent sort of game-changing, ace in the hole technologies that we would never see unless our national backs were up against the wall.
That's something we didn't get to last time. Like, if we have this technology, which there's another question. We can go to it and spin off on that question. Yeah. Do you know about Mark McClan? This is alien reproduction vehicle and the anti-gravity research from the 50s. Rumors are that we had a closed door breakthrough and have been made but kept tightly held down, which goes along to what you just said. We have cracked gravity. If we have, and we've spoken about this, but you didn't get to talk about it last time, do you think they would break out that technology? Do you think they should break out that technology to change the world?
Well, you would sort of have competing hypotheses, right? Inside the organization, trying to just determine, decide what to do. Because on the one hand, you've got something that could upend the world, upend the economy totally. Where are our economies based? Where are our strengths? It's in the, the fossil fuels, and there are clean ways, cleaner ways of using them. But so much of our economy and the world's economy functions around that. And now you're going to roll out something as awesome as the claimed anti-gravity, flying cars tomorrow, planes that don't require jet engines and so forth, endless, everybody's got a mini power plant buried in their backyard, unlimited power, or every community has one. And it's not relying upon burning anything. like fossil fuels, you're gonna totally upend the global economy. You're going to automatically, if you did it overnight, you would turn millions of people out of work who work in those industries, transportation, drilling, mining, whatever. So that's the first problem. But if you had a technology that was capable of besting anyone or anything on the face of the planet, human-wise, in warfare, would you demonstrate it to get everybody to suddenly scrap all of their nukes and scrap all of their jet fighters and submarines? Probably not, because that's another enormous part, like it or leave it, of our economy is the defense industry. There are millions of people employed in it. Okay. So what do you do with it? Well, number one, if there's something capable of anti-gravity, and we're going to turn that technology loose. Anything that's capable, I think Lazar said this. I don't care where you are on Bob Lazar, but what he said is true. If you have anti-gravity, then force fields become, Star Trek stuff becomes instantly a reality. And that means also weapons technology. Are you going to really hand this over to every maverick inventor and every tinkerer in his garage? And set this technology free? How do you do it? How do you drip it into society, right? It has to be governed, has to not governed like regulated, but it probably does have to be regulated. But that's an awesome, we're not talking about the inventor of Alka-Seltzer tablets that fizz when you drop them in the water, right? And make your stomach feel better. We're talking about something that turns things on its head. And I see them keeping that buried until literally our backs are against the wall in a military conflict.
Do you believe the McCandless story he told? I mean, he just passed on a couple of months ago.
I think it's plausible, and it sounds a little cavalier that they would have a demonstration going on in a hangar at Norton Air Force Base. You got an air show going on out there, but back here in the back hangar, we've got bigwigs coming in to look at these ARVs. Apparently, 3 of them sitting on the floor there, turned on.
Yeah, Brad Sorensen. For people who don't know the story, Brad Sorensen supposedly saw this and then told Mark McCandless, who drew it based on Sorensen's eyewitness account of the craft.
Yeah, it's. I guess.
By the way, I don't know if you saw it, but in Ross Coulthard's book, he says that somebody showed the guy who he said was read into the program, Nat Kobitz. He was shown pictures of the ARV, and it was an interesting reaction, but obviously nothing definitive. But I'm gonna skip on to the next question, and I know you don't know the answer to this, but everybody wants to know, any ideas of why Carter, if he was actually briefed on the truth, why he would be crying at his desk. That's from Henry.
Well, I think, conceivable, right? Look at so that ties into DeLong's reaction, supposedly. Right. Carter was apparently a very deeply religious man. So that finding out that we maybe aren't who we think we are, didn't come from where we think we came from, would have to be earth-shattering.
I'm going to follow up. Here's a pushback on what you said as far as not putting out the technology. And V is like, well, yeah, we don't put out the technology, but then there's no jobs, there's no jobs, but then we have no water, no air, and we're all dead. Meaning if we don't make that change, the planet's going to continue to go to hell. So where's the point where you actually step in and say, okay, this is not a great move because this technology could be used for the wrong purposes, but we need to change. Otherwise, planet's going to go, we're all going to disappear. That's the argument. What do you say to that?
I'm not in charge, right? It's
what if you were, though? What if you were in charge? How would you handle that? Like, they come to you and they like, you know what, the planet, the environment, we're beyond the point. We're right at that point. We need to make a change over to clean technology. what would you do? I'm not saying it's an easy answer, obviously.
It's not an easy answer. Number one, there are still miles to go in cleaning up our own act and using what we have more efficiently and more cleanly. There's still a long way to go. One of the biggest reasons, my own personal opinion, that we are where we are, it's the lack of follow through and not enough advocacy of these initiatives. When wasn't it Clinton or was it Obama? When Obama was president, we were all supposed to just pretty soon thereafter, we're going to have solar panels on the roofs of our houses. But the power companies don't want that. They don't want paying customers to suddenly be selling them energy back coming from their batteries and their solar cells on their rooftops. It's greed. It's corporate greed. The organizations, corporations, the government, and the will of the people aren't on the same sheet of music. Not enough of them. It's not a strong enough movement. And then you never get follow through. You get all of these advocates out there for whatever the cause might be, and it maybe doesn't die on the vine, but it doesn't go anywhere because of competing interest and lobbyists, the oil lobby, right? The energy lobby in Washington, D.C. That's the roadblock. So these presidents that run on these platforms of doing X, Y, Z, when they get into office, I mean, that's one thing. People will say anything and everything to get elected.
Right.
But once they get into office, the government is one part of it, but then you've got the economy and corporate America and global corporations trying to convince them to turn down profit to go in another direction that is more common sense, more healthy. That it's, it usually takes some kind of a major disaster to get people to start paying close enough attention to something that it deserves, right? So I sure hope it doesn't get bad enough as far as the ecology of the planet and all of that before we reach some turning point that we can't come back around before people start to kind of get it across the board from the highest levels of government down to the grassroots levels. But typically it takes something really super dramatic. People have to feel the pain. Okay. And I don't mean the ordinary people. Either the pain has to be bad enough, like a Katrina scale disaster, or it has to affect the people that are in positions of power that make those decisions, that affect those things. It has to affect them. Until they are personally affected by it, like, I don't know, gasoline prices or whatever. These, congressmen, they don't make a lot of money. But senators that have been up there and some Congress people that have been there for years and years and years, I don't know any of them that are living paycheck to paycheck, right? They get enriched by being connected. And they don't feel the prices that we have to pay at the pump for things or for groceries. All they do is hear it. It's like ambient noise, right? They listen to and they act on things that affect them, that affect their constituents. Like if it's shutting down a military base in their region or a big defense factory, they don't want that. They make all the sense in the world to move it somewhere else, but they don't want that because that's going to cause them pain. So until you cause enough of them pain, and I'm not talking about bodily harm pain, I'm talking about,
No, I get it. So back to the environment, and it's one of the arguments people make. They're interested in our nukes because they're worried about us blowing ourselves up. And I'm like, there's just an equal amount of a chance that they're interested in us blowing up the planet. They don't really care so much about us. And I was really interested to see Robert Hastings in Ross Coulthard's book, he's like, in the past, he's like, I think they're trying to send us a message. And it was kind of like a positive thing. They're trying to save us. Now he's like, I don't know what the message is. They could be wanting to take over the planet. They could be wanting to save the planet because they have plans after we're gone to take over the planet. So there's so many different ways to take that. And I know, I think you agree with that. We don't know why they're shutting down nukes or why they're turning on nukes. You know, I think it's related. I do think it's related to them not wanting to see the planet become, you know, a nuclear disaster wasteland. But I don't think, I personally, just an opinion, I don't think it's about us. I think it's more about the planet for whoever's here. And I don't know who's here. So it's hard to speculate when you don't know who's here, what they are, but that would be my speculation, that it's really not as much to do about us.
Yeah. Who knows? Right. We can only go off what we've observed.
Right.
Right. And the observations tell us that they don't like, or at least they're very interested in, our most advanced developments, technologically speaking. They're really super interested in it. And the things that we know about are only the things that we know about. I suspect that that's just the crust of it, that anything that has ever been truly nightmarish to deal with what we're talking about, we surely would not have been informed about it, right? And who knows what that is. We may have a very, very good reason after decades of, if you take my position, after decades of not being able to ignore something this compelling in our skies and wherever else it's been spotted, we may have a very, very good reason for being concerned about our nukes and our defense capabilities. You know, could they strip us of our defenses and leave another nation armed with theirs? And then could they fly up and down the borders of one nation or another and spark an incident and cause a launch? Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows, right? If it's true that they've been observed here for eons, and really the evidence for that is in ancient writings, be it biblical or otherwise, paintings on cave walls, and other artistic accounts like Nuremberg, Germany, and other places. They've been around here for a long, long time. Were they coming here, or were they coming out from somewhere here? You know, have they shared this place with us? Do they have a vested interest in the health of the planet? Are they more worried about themselves than us? Are we getting in their way? Are we polluting their way of living or whatever it is? Who knows? But they're not. Like I say, it's implausible to me that they could ignore this for all these years. And I firmly believe, though I don't have proof, that they've been very seriously looking at this for a long, long time. And they could have very, very good reasons for not telling us all of the so-called core story.
I don't know the answer to this question. I do not know the Sapphire Project. Are you aware of that at all? Eric Davis and Hal Puthoff and the Sapphire Project?
No.
Me either. Since we're talking about Eric Davis, and I'm going to bring it up because we didn't talk about it last time, and you know it's a subject dear to my heart because I know Eric. When you first heard about the Wilson Davis leak, so last year, I think it was 2019, it leaked. What was your opinion of it when you first saw that? Were you aware of Greer's story back in '97, where he said he briefed a joint chiefs fella, and then later on he outed him as Admiral Wilson? Were you aware of that before the Wilson Davis leak?
I think vaguely I was aware, but I don't think I put it together. But when I read the Wilson Davis meeting notes, or whatever you call it, the Wilson Davis leak notes, the very first thing that jumped out at me was the notes read exactly like Dr. Eric Davis speaks today and any other time in history that he has ever been videoed speaking. The notes read in the same vernacular. It's the same way he talks. I mean, it was just very obvious on its face to me.
No, I
Number
thought the
one.
same exact thing. And I've read so much of his material in messages. I'm like, this is Eric. You know, it's like, it sounds just like Eric, even though he gave me no comment back then. But sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. Go ahead.
Well, and then the other thing was that I don't know Admiral Tom Wilson, but I know a lot of people that know him. I know two people, both of them worked essentially for him. One was his executive officer back when they were more junior. And having been in the military and having been in the community for 20 something years and seeing how general officers work and organizational leadership, how that works. And if you look in the notes at what he's saying, the reasons why he was there in the first place, they all do that. And we've talked about this a couple of times. These leadership positions, these generals, these admirals that are in charge of these agencies, they may not have a lot of time to go do this while they're sitting as the director of an agency, but near the end of their term or maybe just after it, they're still treated like royalty. They are given a driver. They have a car. They will not drive themselves. They can. They want to. Most of them do. Not allowed. They're treated with all.
Let me just interrupt 1 second, Michael, just so people know what Michael's referring to. As in the notes, it talks about how Admiral Wilson was on a farewell tour after he had retired from the WD. He was the director of the DIA, and supposedly in the notes he was in Vegas on this tour. So, and that's how Davis came to encounter him. So, sorry to interrupt, just so because I know not everybody.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, so it's the plausibility of the reasons behind him being in Nevada in the first place, being in Las Vegas. He was there to meet some people, shake some hands, and thank the contractors for all the hard work and support that they had done at the testing range out there at Nellis and other places. And he was making the rounds, and they all do it. I've been at places when they've come through. They hand out these challenge coins. They come around and meet people, and they even have a little town hall and take questions. That's the whole reason for being. So there were a lot of things that lined up in there. Number one, I kind of knew the guy because I knew so many people that knew him, Admiral Wilson. Number two, it was exceedingly probable that the reasons why he were there were exactly right. He was on a farewell tour. I've seen how those operate numerous times. And the notes read just like Eric Davis speaks. So go pick your interview of Eric Davis, read those notes 2 or 3 times, kind of get it in your mind how it flows, and then listen to Davis speak. It's just, to me, there's just no doubt he's the author of the notes. Now, would he have conjured all that up? I don't think so, because A, he's a clear professional, and his reliability and his trust, the trust that's placed in him for his top level security clearance and the background investigation that goes into that talks to people that he knew and people that knew him knew, and the branches go out from there when they're updating that every 6 years. He has been under intense vetting by the government ever since he first gained his security clearance. He cannot be in the business of lying, deceiving, or publishing anything that's untoward in any way. He has got to maintain an impeccable lifestyle because he will most likely be taking a polygraph test every 6 years as part of his security update. So you have to live and work the straight and narrow. So you have a person here in Eric Davis who's got the very highest credentials that are offered in this country, just about, with his security clearance and all of the professional, top level, top shelf vetting that goes into him. You've got the notes that read like he speaks every day. And then you've got Admiral Wilson, who's apparently in town there in Vegas to meet and greet the troops and thank them for a job well done. all of that is just so common sense that it makes the story that the notes tell, or what's the underlying story, um, makes you kind of, it's like if any one part of that whole thing is true, then you got to take a closer look at the rest of it. Well, I see a lot of truth in that, in those notes. So why wouldn't the topic of the conversation be real?
And the whole NRL document that allegedly Greer brought with him or did not bring with him, or did bring in, it was a hoax or not a hoax. Does that affect your opinion whatsoever?
I already look at Greer. There's a lot of cool stuff he's done, like the citizens' hearings at the National Press Club and stuff like that. That was just, that was the first time, I guess, that so many people of such high character had been
Disclosure
brought together in
Project
one
hearings,
place.
yes.
Yeah. And then all of those series of YouTube interviews where they put those out there for people to watch. You can go see these discrete interviews of people.
Right.
I thought that was all great. But some of the other stuff that he has said, um, his use of the word, I'll just give one example that just blows me away, just turns me off every time I hear it. His use of the word scalar technologies, scalar this and scalar that. Okay, I'll give him, he could probably spell the word scalar, but does he really have any clue? Um, to me, there's such a grain of salt that I apply to everything he says. I do have a good appreciation for some of the efforts that he has made in getting this topic pushed to the front of people's consciousness. No pun intended. But that document, number one, you have to ask yourself: a director of an agency is handed a highly classified, very sensitive document by a civilian. I don't care where he handed it to him. I don't care if it was inside the Pentagon or down at Starbucks. You've got a civilian handing you a classified document. The very first thing that's going to go through my mind in a situation like that is everything I've been taught about a situation like that. If you believe it is legitimate, you seize the document and you work your damnedest right then and there. I don't care if your wife's having a baby, you get that document protected and you turn it over to security, right? The first question Wilson should have asked is, where did you get this document? Well, we don't hear anything about that. We just hear that, oh, that's cool. I'll go look into that. Thanks for letting me know. I find that a little bit hard to believe. The organizations that are listed there, I'm not going to comment on whether they exist or not, because I spent a lot of time at the NRO myself. But to me, for that document to have changed hands from a civilian, uncleared person to a very highly cleared government official, whatever the setting was, is just implausible. And that an investigation didn't get spurred from that is also implausible. The fact that it has that letterhead that's U.S. Air Force, well, the NRO was born out of Air Force and CIA, sort of parallel efforts that were ongoing by those two agencies. So I can believe that a document would have an Air Force letterhead, and I can believe it when it would have these organizations that are listed as addressees for that message down the side. But it seems to me for that to suddenly appear outside of a skiff and appear in a civilian's hands, more likely it was recreated from memory, from someone on the inside, maybe, because they couldn't just dream these organizations up if they were real. They're used to seeing official record message traffic, as it's referred to, memos, directives, and things like that coming out of the agency. So they would know how they're organized when they're sent out. I've got several NRO memoranda that I pulled down from the Freedom of Information Act stuff from the CIA's CRES website back during the creation of the NRO back in the early 60s. The memos don't look like that one. And some of them are from the NRO's security office. So I don't know. I wish
I would have known you last year when I was working on it. I mean, I did not put a lot of, I didn't focus on that document. It didn't affect me, but still, it would have been nice to have you to fall back on and ask you about documents, because I am not a document guy. But so yeah, Greer, I have the same opinion of Greer that you do. Did some great stuff with the Disclosure Project, but it's like, do I wish he was not a part of this story? Of course I do. I wish he would never have been a part of this story. And from what I was told, that whole briefing in April of '97, he really did not need to be there, which tells me, yeah, most likely, looking at it now, hearing things over the past couple of months, that document probably played zero role whatsoever.
Well, I think you can ignore the document, because I think the most compelling thing of the two is certainly to me the Wilson Davis notes. They mention the document. You get enough context from that. You don't need the document, which to me, like I say, the first question you have to ask is, how did that get outside the facility?
Yeah, they do not mention it. They don't mention that document at all. It's like,
I thought he mentioned Greer though.
He mentions Greer. He mentions Greer a few times, but he doesn't mention the document. So that's why I guess maybe. Well, yeah.
I'm just saying you kind of have the whole shooting match in the Wilson Davis notes. You don't really need that document. You don't really need the Greer document. The infighting that I saw recently with another researcher, and you know what I'm talking about. I think it's sort of silly to be arguing about letterhead, and learn more. You need to learn more about the genesis of the NRO, and then you could kind of pretty easily understand that letterhead could have had it more apt to have a Air Force logo on it than a CIA logo, because of the differences in the nature of the two organizations. CIA is much more clandestine, much more secretive, and the Air Force, the NRO was put under the Secretary of the Air Force originally.
Right.
So, I wouldn't focus too much on that document. I mean, there's enough Greer there to make me kind of cringe. Bless his heart.
No. Yeah, I agree. Here's a question from earlier, which you kind of hinted on, because I know you're open-minded, since we don't know what the heck we're dealing with. Based on your observations, is there any reasonable evidence that non-terrestrial, undetectable sources have assets on the ground among us? And for me, it's just, I've heard stories. That's all I've heard are stories. So I don't really know if that's evidence. What's your take on that?
All I know is about that would be from people like Dr. David Jacobs. And if I'm understanding it correctly, he's either retired or he certainly has stopped doing what he was doing research-wise, because he came to a conclusion. And I don't think he liked the conclusion he came to. And the conclusion, and I'm paraphrasing, but the conclusion was that all of his patients, all of his subjects were telling accurate stories. They truly, sort of like John Mack, they really believed that what had happened to them happened. And according to Jacobs, he believes there's, and I tend to kind of agree with this. He believes there's something ulterior going on, right? Think about it. And I've heard Richard Dolan say the same thing. When do these things predominantly show up? When do people predominantly have these experiences? It's usually in the dead of night.
Right.
These things, they're not landing on my front yard out here, right? They are using signature management. They're coming in, they're going out without being detected for the most part. They are leaving people scarred, either mentally or physically or both. Not everyone believes it's all champagne and graffiti. A lot of the people who've had these experiences wish they had never had the experience. And I believe Jacob may have used words to this effect, that there's a covert nature about what they're doing. They're doing something in secret. They appear to be, right? Allegedly. And that based on his research, it was just case closed that they're here. There's been some tinkering going on. They've been taking fetuses. They've been impregnating women, taking fetuses weeks later. Women have been going to doctors, verifiably pregnant with ultrasounds and what have you. And then weeks or months later, showing back up, no signs of pregnancy, no signs of a fetus. But then later, some of these same women are shown offspring that they maternally feel is of their own body somehow or another. I mean, some of that stuff is disturbing if you think about it, right? So what's the purpose? Who knows? But I believe those were his conclusions, that he came to the end of the road. He didn't see any need, because so many of these accounts were just so similar after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, or maybe thousands of them that he had done over the years, that the pattern was there, and he wrote his conclusions, and sort of like Michael Swords, right?
Right.
Just kind of says, hey, like Stanton Friedman, the evidence is overwhelming.
Yeah, and I know Jacobs went even further, thinking that the hybrids were messaging on AOL Messenger and they were coming after him, and he's really scared. And somebody who I made friends with, Charlie Paris, is working on a documentary related to Jacobs' work, Hopkins' work, and Mac's work, and it's more of a darker feeling, or darker, what's the word? It's got a more darker aspect to it compared to the free stuff. The free survey. It's like an 800-page book, which I have not read yet. That's more of the line along the lines as the experience is having a positive effect on people. It's helping people. It's like a spiritual evolution that happens after these experiences, and I don't doubt that with a lot of people have that. I don't know if that was the intended outcome, or it was just a side product of what happened, and it expands their minds. But I want to go back to Wilson Davis for a second, because I really need to go with. I want to address this. V says, I'm not comfortable calling Admiral Wilson a liar on the word of Greer and Davis. Number one, take out Greer. That's fine. Davis has not commented on it, so that's not a proper argument. Just so you know, I personally think Admiral Wilson is lying, but I'm not like calling him a liar in a bad way. I think he has to lie just because he has to lie because of the program and security stuff. It's not like it's like, oh my God, Admiral Wilson is a liar. It's just what he has to do. Do you agree?
What else is he going to do?
I mean,
what else is he going to do?
Yeah, he's not going to come out and say, yeah, I found the program and they have a craft. They told me that we have a craft, and right. I don't know what people expect.
He's got to do anything within his power to squelch this. He's doing exactly what I would do.
Right.
He cannot. I don't care how true it is. He can't admit to that. There's just no way. Has he told his wife? Who knows? But it's anybody that thinks that he should take one for the team. Try that. Try that on for side. Wear those shoes. There's just no way, right? There's just no way. Chances are all of this will come out someday if there's something to come out. But I don't see anybody giving up their livelihood. It's not just their livelihood, stripping of his rank and benefits and retirement. It's very seriously, the end of his life as he knows it. You're talking about incarceration, going to jail for leaking national security information.
Right.
Who's going to do that? Who wants to go to jail?
Well, that leads me. The question would be, well, why did he risk even telling Eric Davis? That's a natural response to me. Why would he even take a chance? Which tells me, and that's speculation on my part, some part of him wants this story out there, because if that's true, and we have an intact craft, not made by not made on Earth, not made by human hands, it's the biggest story in the history of the human race.
Isn't that like he called up Eric Davis and said, hey, meet me in Las Vegas. I got something I'm just dying to tell you. He did apparently, according to those notes, some very serious These guys are connected. People like admirals and head of agencies. He did some very serious looking into who Eric Davis was at the time, um, and he told him in the strictest confidence. Okay, he didn't roger up this information on a whim, right? He put some serious thought into this and was very careful about it. So, whether he wanted the information ultimately out or not, who knows? But maybe he had enough faith in the people he had been talking to that are mentioned in the notes to think that maybe there was a way to, without spilling it to the public. And of course, he's dealing with what's referred to as a trusted agent.
Right.
Okay. He's dealing with a trusted fellow cleared person who understands the gravity of letting go of that information. Because if Eric Davis had those notes only, if those notes had only been in Eric Davis's care, we wouldn't know anything about him, because there's no way he was going to leak those. And I'm sure he had a copy. And from what I understand, it was totally by, I don't know, happenstance. Maybe the family of Edgar Mitchell didn't really realize.
Yeah. They were going to throw out his personal UFO stuff, and then somebody came and said, no, we'll take it. And they found that and they saw it, and the rest is history. Sean asks, how the hell does Michael know so much about UFOs? That's my paraphrasing. So did you work on a UFO study, or is it your own personal research? And thank you, Sean, for the super chat. Thank you.
I never worked on a UFO study, but I did. All I can say is when you see something like I saw, and you've heard other people say this, it burns like a fire inside you to find out what it was. So the first chances I had were about a year and a half later, when I got transferred to a site over in the UK that was NRO related. And trust me, I dug and dug and dug and dug to try to find out because I have always assumed that what I saw which was a black triangle that directly overflew an aircraft carrier battle group in broad daylight in the Persian Gulf. I naturally assumed, because of the lack of reaction by the ships and all of their capabilities in radar and air defense and everything else, the lack of reaction left me to believe that that was one of ours, and somebody knew that it was going to overfly and did nothing about it.
Somebody criticized your take on that, saying, well, there was a reaction. There was I forget exactly what happened. There was a reaction. They sounded the horn, and that was a reaction.
I find that weird that they sounded the horn and broke from the underway replenishment. I always found that weird because I didn't know it was going to happen. And I'd been on that ship several days. I was only ever on these ships for very brief periods of time in the job that I had. And then when that ship went out of the Gulf, I might go back and fly missions off the land, off of an airstrip somewhere. Then when another ship came in, I might go out to it. So I wasn't permanent party. I wasn't a permanent member of those crews on those ships, but I was on the ships, and you hear everything that's announced over the speaker system called the 1MC. You hear what next evolution, they call it, what next event is going to happen. And I didn't hear in the morning's plan of the day, or didn't read it anywhere in the plan of the day, which is printed at the time. And is in every division office, you can see the scheduled activities. You can see we're going to do an underway replenishment with the USS Independence. You can see we're going to do an air defense exercise. You can see whatever's going on. You can see the helo flight schedule that's coming on and off of the ship every day. I could have missed it. That, hey, we're going to do an emergency breakaway at the very end of our underway, being tied up next to the carrier, and while we're moving. And I didn't see that. I just thought it was really odd to do it then, given that it looked like everybody was looked like a surprise to everyone. But then again, they're supposed to be able to do that at a moment's notice, because that's what the drill is for. The emergency breakaway drill is to rapidly undo all those lines and cables and hoses that are connecting the ships as they cruise along side by side, and quickly get the ships as far apart from one another as they can so they can defend themselves if they need to.
And if people don't know what Michael's talking about, go back to the last interview. He goes through very in depth at his sighting, his experience back in the Gulf. And Michael, I'm going to cut you off there. I'm going to get to some questions. Sean asked, I'm not exactly sure, should we consider no part of this an emergency because no one breaks their NDA? I think he's talking about Wilson Davis, but even overall, Lou will not break an NDA. I think maybe, is there a point where these guys would break their NDA? Like, with Greer, he had a lot of witnesses who said, screw it, I'm going to tell what I had. I signed an agreement, but a security clearance, I'm just going to talk about this. This is too important. I mean, obviously it's a personal choice. I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where either Davis or Wilson or Elizondo. I don't think Lou would. Lou has been pretty clear about that. And if I misunderstood your question, Sean, let me know.
Greer didn't sign. Greer had nothing at stake.
Well, the witnesses go forward.
Well, the witnesses certainly would have their security oaths, and which are prosecutable. Okay, so
and he's talking overall too, just so you know.
Yeah, the first thing you have to ask is the moment you find one of these witnesses who's willing to go to jail, then you might find a guy that's willing to talk about the program, because that is exactly what's going to happen to them if it's real.
Or you got the Nat Kovitz guy who was close to dying, telling Ross, "What are you going to do to me? I'm dying." That's another situation.
Well, apparently, yeah. So I think it's. I don't expect that out of anyone.
This is a good question from V, because people always ask me this. Why is Eric Davis? Do you have any idea why Eric Davis was able to talk? He doesn't talk about Wilson Davis. He did meet with Wilson, but he also talks about the crash retrieval program openly on various interviews. And I can't figure out why that would be allowed. Any idea?
No, I've thought about that myself. He wouldn't do that without first asking, what can he talk about? So to me, the answer is there's an element of authorization running in the background here for Eric Davis to talk about that, and for Hal Puthoff at the the conference for the scientific exploration. What's that called?
SCU, and also remind me, we got to talk about Lou's book before you go. SCU, Scientific.
No, that's Scientific Coalition for Ufology.
Which I'm
talking about the one that's Puthoff's a member of, the Society for Scientific Exploration.
The SSE.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have the journal out, the Journal of Scientific Exploration.
Yeah, I mean he went, and it was on YouTube. Somebody had recorded that where he
it was in Vegas
talked about the ATIP findings, right? Before he can do that, it had to go. You've heard Lou talk about the DOPSR process, the review process. It's the same thing. If I wanted, or Davis wanted to write a book, if you have a clearance and you're going to publish a book, then you need to have, especially if it's about anything to do with defense or national security, even if it's fiction, you still have to have it reviewed. So you have to get authorization to say the things you want to say. And, Tom Clancy had talked at length about all that. He had to have his stuff reviewed, the late Tom Clancy. And so they go through it, and they'll change happy to glad or whatever. They change some words around to make sure that it's not revealing too much, and you're good to go. It's all about how you say it.
Right.
So both of them, I think, would have had to have authorization. I know that if I was in that program, there's just no way you speak about it without getting authorization. It's just like before I went on the Unidentified show. The very first thing I did was call my security officer and explain to him exactly, give him the full context, and find out what it was. If anything, I would be disallowed, if I didn't already know, from speaking about. It's just it's what you are instructed to do when you work in that environment.
There's a question that somebody asked earlier. So it was it was yesterday. There was an announcement that Lou is writing a book. I think he signed with William Morris Agency. I could be wrong about that. And people are starting to attack him now. He's in it for the money. And I'm like, I hope he makes $10 million. He's been the best thing since I've gotten into ufology in the mid-90s. It's like we have not made anything close to this kind of progress since then. So I'm assuming you agree. There's no problem. I want to read the book right now. And I don't think he's been hiding stuff just to saving it. I don't think he's been saving stuff for a book. I'll put it that way.
No. And who could give him any ill will? I mean, let's look at this. He's a retired government service employee. He's living off of his retirement, but he's not old enough to receive Social Security, which is probably going to be, $2,000 or $3,000 a month. So he's got his retirement, which is a finite amount. He was working, though I have no idea what his salary was, for TTSA. Now, to my knowledge, he's not mentioned being employed by anyone. So what's the man doing for income? Okay. So he wants to write a book. Let him make some money. Who cares?
Right.
He's done nothing but good for this subject. And, I get pretty fed up with people just trying to pick things apart for the hell of it when they don't, unsubstantiated without basis.
I agree. And Sean also brings up a point. He's like, he's a government contractor too. So yeah, he makes money on that. But me personally, I don't have a problem with it. I just don't. I mean, I have never sensed anything. I've never sensed any lying from Lou. I've never sensed, I know he can't talk about a lot of stuff. I know some stuff's on the borderline and he's not clear what he can talk about. That's why the whole IG investigation part of it may be taking place. That's why Sheen's trying to get him some clearance. And maybe, I hope that comes out in the book. I mean, I've never sensed, like I said, nothing lie-wise. So it's like, from the very beginning, the first impression I got from Lou was like, oh my God, this is the guy you want as the face of your franchise, speaking in sports terms. This is the guy you want representing you because, he's well-spoken. He's smart. When he was on 60 Minutes, I'm like, please let my family be watching this. They weren't. I have nothing negative to say about Lou. That doesn't mean I don't agree with everything he says, but so what? Who do you agree with on this planet all the time? So yeah, I have nothing but positive to say about him.
So what is he hoping? Is one angle with the IG that he's hoping to gain some sort of top cover to be able to say more publicly?
That's what Sheehan has hinted at. Because I think there are certain things he can talk about, but with this, we're gonna revoke your security clearance hanging over his head. He said people were consistently doing that, even up until recently, that he's worried about what he can say. There may be something he feels he can say, but if they're saying, well, we're going to revoke your security clearance and then he can't work as a contractor, I think he was worried about that. But if he gets and people may not like this, but if he gets a big advancement on his book and he's not worried about that anymore, he's not worried about having to pay bills, I think he may be able to, and obviously he's not going to talk about classified stuff, but stuff that he felt was on the edge where they would try to revoke his security clearance. I think he's going to talk about that stuff. I don't know that, but if he's writing a book, I think it would be a lot more, or at least more than what we've heard now. But I don't know. I'm speculating, Michael.
Yeah, I don't see it going in much more detail than what he's already been able to do, unless he's given authorization.
I agree. I'm trying to think. Anything else you want to cover? What's your take on what you're dealing with? I'll give my take, but my take on what we're dealing with changes all the time because I don't know what we're dealing with. I have different people who have told me their opinions privately, but in the end, I still don't know. I don't know if it's one intelligence. I don't know if it's multiple intelligences. I don't know if it's extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial. They were here before humans. I don't know any of that. What's your take? Your current take?
I don't know what to think of it. I just know that based on the mountains of reports and claims and encounters and what have you. There's something very clearly going on based on the research of others. It may not be all that pleasant. It may just be the reality of which we have not been maybe accurately apprised of,
Right.
informed, educated over the decades. Who knows? Who knows? Because this stuff has been around for eons. But is it anywhere in our history books? I don't think so. We're taught how we got here, yet there are people looking at ancient disappeared civilizations that have competing theories. And then you have this phenomenon that is, to me, very clearly real. Something's going on. I just don't know what to make of it. So I tend to lean on the side of sort of bracing myself for the big news, because I think it's going to be it's probably going to have different aspects to it. There may be something really cool about it, but already it flies in the face of what we have been told. If you want to look at, say, from a religious perspective, that we are God's chosen people, the concept of original sin and all of that. Did Jesus die on the cross for these others too? Is that story real? It should,
Pandora's box.
Yeah, it's. I don't enjoy thinking about it, because it's to be quite frank about it, because I think if it was really easy and simple, they would have told us. But I think that both aspects of what the potential core story is and any potential technologies to be gleaned or that have already been gleaned, both of those things are like giant padlocks on the door. And in combination with all of the actions, good, bad, or indifferent, that have been taken over the years to suppress this topic and to suppress people's beliefs and to ridicule people, some very credible people, and to make them become hermits or worse, all because they told a story that to them was very real and very real, in a real way affected their lives. There is a reason, there's a motivation for why they haven't told us and why they did the things they've done that we've read about from supposedly credible sources. And maybe that's the three padlocks on the topic.
That's a great answer, and I agree. And the last question we'll take: would you say that it's safe to say there's more to reality than our institutions condone? And my answer is yes. For me, I cannot come at this topic without addressing consciousness, and to everybody, consciousness is something different. But I just think we're more than a physical body, and I think these beings are too. And I think they're more advanced than us, assuming they're even if they're physical. And I think that's where, for me, the interest lies once we get past the masses accepting that something is real. I don't know I know we've talked about consciousness too. We've talked about remote viewing, all of that stuff. For me, it's woo for a lot of people. But when I first got into this, that's what I first got into. It wasn't nuts and bolts. I went from the real extreme metaphysics to being believer in everything I read, to becoming more discerning, and now I'm in the middle and wanting to go back more towards consciousness. What about you?
Yeah, well, the notion of consciousness and remote viewing and things of that nature. I mean, I've tried it, and I believe it's real. I believe in the work that Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff did. That's all documented fact, and I've tried it, but I'm too. Not only am I verbose when I speak, but my mind is also not. I can't easily quiet my mind, as Russell Targ likes to say. but I've tried it a number of times, and I find myself more apt to do some lucid dreaming than to actually see or perceive any target that I'm trying to go after. And I've kind of proven that to myself of late, actually. So it's harder. Apparently, from what we read, we all have the some sort of innate capability within us to do that. Some more than others, but I can just say from my own experience that uh, it's not easy. It's not easy for me. I haven't. I've had a little success with that with the iPhone app, ESP Trainer, that Targ's group developed.
Yes, I have used that too.
Significantly greater than chance. I've been successful, which gave me some hope. But in trying to go to one of these websites and pick a random, from the target pool,
right,
and then sit there, what I invariably end up doing. And number one, you can't do it at night when you lay down in bed. That's not because you go to sleep. And those images that pop in your mind are the beginning of some sort of dream state. I've kind of confirmed that for myself. But I've tried it sitting on a sofa, and the same thing happens. The images I sketched them all out. I did my due diligence. I tried hard, but everything that I got was some event I'd been involved in recently, more apt to be like college football related because I'd gone to a game. And those are the images that I got. And I was so comfortable. So you can't be comfortable. You have to be alert. You need to have a partner, I think, at least I do. And I kind of look forward to, exploring it more, because I do think there's just, again, the body of evidence about remote viewing and consciousness is just too great for there not to be something to it. So
no, I agree, and I did enough when I took a class with Lynn Buchanan back in '97 that I'm like, oh my god, I'm like, this is not a blockbuster session, but there's enough here for me to say, all right, I'm getting aspects of the target with a sixth sense that there's no way I would be able to get, and so I need to go back and do it again. I stopped for some reason. And Lynn Buchanan's like, the biggest problem is people stop. They don't find the time to do it. He goes, you want to get good, you got to practice. Carnegie Hall. This will be the last question real quick. Do you think the stigma and ridicule is behind us? I don't, because if we start getting into experiencers, it's going to hit hard. I think it'll hit really hard if we make that next step. And I think it's nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I think it's in one sense it is, because look at this legislative language we've seen. Who would have thought, right?
It's amazing.
So the walls are coming down, and from what I understand, there are a lot more science and academic types that are looking at this, sort of banding together. When I see the National Academy of Sciences looking at this publicly in an open sense and sharing their results, when I see public-facing organizations admitting that they're involved in stuff like this, that's when I think we can all kind of breathe easier that the stigma is shedded away.
When Neil, what's his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson says, ladies and gentlemen, there's somebody here and they're not human. When that happens, then it's like, oh my God, really? I don't know if that'll ever happen, but Michael, thank you so much. It was great. And everybody who asked questions, thank you, because we can't do it without great questions. You guys asked some really good questions. And we will do this again. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, everybody. Michael, we'll talk.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Thanks, Joe.
Talk to you later. I'm really lucky I met you. You're one of my favorite people in this field. And
no, likewise.
Yeah,
likewise. I've enjoyed our company. Looking forward to the next time.
You too. Talk soon.
See you later.
See you, everybody. Thanks, Rodrigo. And I will start doing more of these with just my Twitter stuff, because I know there's people on YouTube. Thanks, Rodrigo. People on YouTube that don't go on Twitter, and they said that I need to do something for them. So I'll just go on my Twitter and put it up, and we'll just go through it. And I'll add my long comments and opinions, and as I'm apt to do. All right, guys, I got to go, and it was good. It's been a while since I've been on here, so thanks again for being here, and I will see you on Twitter.